You didn't scream. You didn't post. You didn't send the paragraph you wrote at 2 a.m. and deleted 3 times. You did something they never prepared for. You saved everything. Every message, every voice note, every threat wrapped in a sweet tone. Every "I never said that," followed by a screenshot proving they did. Every apology that came with conditions. Every promise that expired the second they felt safe again. You built a case while they built a story, and the difference between a case and a story is simple. One has evidence, the other has performance. Let's talk about what really happened. Because this isn't just about screenshots, this is about a pattern you lived inside of for longer than you should have. A pattern so subtle, so calculated that people on the outside couldn't see it. They saw the version of the story that was being sold to them, the edited version. The version where you were difficult, where you were too sensitive, where you always had a problem, where you were the one who couldn't let things go. But you knew something they didn't. You were paying attention the whole time. See, manipulators rely on one thing above everything else. Not intelligence, not charm, not even lies. They rely on your silence. They count on you staying quiet. They count on you being too embarrassed to show people the receipts. They count on your loyalty working against you. They count on you still protecting them even after they burned you. They count on the version of you that says, "I don't want drama," because that version lets them rewrite history without resistance. That's the game. Control the narrative, discredit the witness, make the evidence feel like overreaction. But you didn't play that game. You just watched and saved. Here's the dark psychology nobody explains clearly enough. What you experienced has a name. It's called covert aggression, and it's one of the most dangerous forms of manipulation because it never looks like what it is. Covert aggression doesn't come with raised voices. It doesn't come with obvious threats. It comes in soft packaging. It comes wrapped in concern. It comes disguised as advice, as humor, as just being honest. It comes in the form of messages that sound reasonable when read alone but feel like poison when you look at the full thread. That's why they were so confident, because individually, each message could be explained away. "I was just venting." You took that out of context. "I was having a bad day." Each piece looked harmless in isolation, but you didn't look at pieces. You looked at patterns, and patterns don't lie. Patterns are the truth that individual moments are designed to hide. You started noticing how the aggression always came after you set a boundary, how the jokes always landed on your insecurities, how the apologies always came with a pivot. "I'm sorry, but you have to understand that you also," how the support was always conditional, how the kindness spiked when they needed something and dropped the second they got it. You noticed all of it, and you saved all of it. Now, let's talk about what happened when the attorney entered the room. Because this is where it gets cold. An attorney is paid to win, not to comfort, not to validate, not to perform. An attorney looks at evidence and makes a calculation. Can we defend this or can't we? That's the only question that matters in that room. So when they sat down, when they handed over the phone, when the attorney scrolled through what you had collected quietly over all those months, something shifted in that room. Not because you were cruel, not because you were out for revenge, but because the truth, when it's organized and documented and time-stamped, doesn't need a speech. It just sits there, heavy, undeniable, breathing. And the attorney did what attorneys do when they see a losing case. They got quiet. That silence was not confusion. That silence was calculation. That silence was the sound of someone realizing that the story they were hired to defend had a problem, a serious problem. The problem was you, the prepared version of you. The patient version of you. The version of you that didn't react, that documented. Because here is what they never told you about patience. Patience is not weakness. Patience is preparation. Every time you chose not to explode, you were collecting. Every time you chose not to send the angry response, you were protecting your position. Every time you swallowed the reaction and just screenshotted quietly, you were building something they couldn't see coming. Let's go deeper into why they never thought this would happen. People who manipulate operate on one core belief: that you need them more than they need you, that your attachment is their leverage, that your fear of losing them is their safety net, that no matter how far they push, you will not blow up the relationship because you care too much. This is called their threat assessment, and yours came back low risk every single time. You stayed. You forgave. You gave another chance. You explained your pain politely. You asked for understanding. You made it easy for them to believe they were untouchable. So they got comfortable. Comfortable people get careless. Careless people leave evidence. They started saying things in writing they would never say out loud in front of witnesses. They started making threats they thought you'd be too scared to use. They started documenting their own behavior without realizing it, because they genuinely believed you would never have the courage to show anyone. They miscalculated one thing. They confused your softness with your strategy. You were not soft because you were weak. You were soft because you were still hoping they would choose differently. But somewhere, quietly, without announcing it, you stopped hoping. And when the hope left, the documentation began. Now, here is the warning. Because they are not done. When people realize the evidence exists, when they realize the case against them is real, they do not immediately become honest. They shift tactics. Watch for this carefully. First comes the reframe. Suddenly, the messages don't mean what you think they mean. Suddenly, there's context you don't have. Suddenly, they become the victim of your obsession with the past. They will try to make your documentation look like instability. They will call it collecting receipts like a crazy person. They will try to take the weapon out of your hands by making you feel ashamed for picking it up. Don't put it down. Second comes the softening, the sudden vulnerability, the tears you haven't seen before, the confession that's designed to create sympathy without creating accountability. I know I wasn't perfect. I was going through things. You know how much I care about you. Deep down. This is not remorse. This is negotiation. They are trying to trade your evidence for their comfort. The price is not the same. Third comes the character attack. If the reframe doesn't work and the softening doesn't work, they will try to destroy your credibility before you can use it. Suddenly, you are unstable. Suddenly, you have a history of lying. Suddenly, people who barely know you are hearing stories about your character that sound just credible enough to create doubt. This is called preemptive narrative control. They are poisoning the well before you can drink from it publicly. You need to know this is coming. Not so you can panic, so you can be unmoved. Because here is the truth about credibility. When your evidence is clean, when your documentation is consistent, when your behavior throughout the entire situation has been measured and precise, character attacks don't land the same way. People can feel the difference between a person telling the truth and a person performing desperation. And they will be performing desperation. Let's talk about what you actually built by choosing documentation over destruction. You could have exploded. You had every reason to. The pain was real. The injustice was real. The disrespect was documented, literally. You could have sent every screenshot to every mutual contact. You could have made their life uncomfortable in 100 different ways that nobody would have blamed you for. You didn't. And that restraint, that cold, deliberate restraint did something that explosion never could have done. It kept you clean. Clean means when this reaches the people it needs to reach, you have no explaining to do about your own behavior. Clean means your hands don't shake when you present what you have. Clean means you never have to say I was angry or I overreacted. Or I said some things too. Clean means the story is one-sided and the one side is yours. That is not luck. That is architecture. You built that. You built it in the moments when you were shaking and still didn't send the message. You built it in the nights when you were furious and still didn't make the call. You built it every single time you chose the screenshot over the outburst, every single time you chose the timestamp over the tantrum, piece by piece, message by message, date by date. You built a truth that could not be argued with. And now here they are, sitting across from someone they hired to protect them, someone who looked at what you quietly assembled, someone who does this professionally, who has seen manipulation, who has seen fabrication, who has seen people try to build cases out of nothing. And that person went quiet. Not because you're powerful in a loud way, not because you threatened anyone, not because you performed, but because you prepared, because you were consistent, because the person sitting across from that attorney right now is not the unhinged, unstable, too sensitive person they described. To everyone, you are organized. You are calm, you are precise, and precise people are terrifying in legal rooms. Here is what I want you to understand about this moment, not just the legal moment, the deeper moment. For a long time, they controlled the story. They decided how you were described in rooms you weren't in. They decided what was true and what was your interpretation. They decided when the conversation happened and when it was over. They decided who knew what and who stayed confused. You had no control over any of that, but you controlled one thing: yourself, your reactions, your words, your behavior, your documentation. And in the end, the only thing that matters in any room, legal, personal, professional, or otherwise, is what actually happened, not what was said about what happened, what actually happened. And what actually happened is sitting on a phone, organized, time-stamped, unanswered. So let this be the lesson you carry forward. Not bitterness, not paranoia. Precision. The world is full of people who talk, who perform, who build versions of events that serve them, who count on your silence, your loyalty, your embarrassment, your love to protect them from the consequences of what they actually did. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone the comfortable version of the truth. You don't owe anyone protection from their own behavior. You don't owe anyone a soft landing after a hard betrayal. Your documentation is not revenge. It is record. It is reality. It is what actually happened, saved in the format they chose to deliver it in. They wrote it. You saved it. They forgot you saved it. That's the whole story. And the attorney sat down, scrolled through, said nothing for a long moment, then looked up and said the only thing a professional can say when the evidence is clean and the case is over before it started: apologize. Now, not because you demanded it, not because you begged for it, not because you performed pain loudly enough for people to take your side, because the truth was always there. You just made sure it was impossible to ignore. You're not ailing anymore. You're not broken anymore. You're not waiting for someone to believe you anymore. You have something better than belief. You have proof. And proof doesn't argue. Proof doesn't explain itself. Proof doesn't need your voice to shake the room. Proof just sits there, cold, patient, permanent, just like you became.